Welcome to the Choose on Purpose podcast. This is our Women of Wisdom series where leaders live with intention. And really, I'm highlighting the women in this space to really be featured. And we're building a collaboration during this conversation. I'm your host, Becky Plautz. And today we get to shine a light on a remarkable woman who's not only redefining her own life and also transforming communities through her work. Welcome, Jennifer Smith from Grant Knowledge Consulting to the show. Thank you for joining me, Jennifer. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing well, Becky, and thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm really pleased to be here.
Yeah, thank you for taking the time. So, Jennifer and I, just like a quick snippet, Jennifer and I met globally through a women's connection company. We had a one on one connection, stayed connected through social media. And what I know about Jennifer is that she's been on a journey and she's sharing really rediscovering herself after divorce to building a thriving grant consulting business that includes what I understand, securing over $4 million in funding for nonprofits this year to date since 2021. Is that right?
Mhm. Correct.
Yeah. So, welcome to the podcast. And before we dive in to your inspiring story and expertise more, I would love for you to tell us more about, what's bringing you joy right now in what you do and who you are.
Oh, I love that question. Um, what's bringing me joy is taking time out every day to really focus on self-care. So,
Mm.
waking up in the morning, first thing, doing my prayers, meditation, getting a little exercise in, and some journaling to really center myself because I'm find that when I do that, then I'm really ready for the day and fully present for my clients and for my friends and family. So, feeling really good about that right now.
Yeah. This is a great time to be reminded too of the things that fill our own cup,
Yeah.
first and foremost, so that
Mhm.
we are able to show up more clear-headed, more focused, and
Yeah.
intentional with the work that we're doing, whether that's working at home or fulfilling work in our
Mhm.
communities. I love that, being able to start the day filling ourselves up so that we can
Mhm.
better show up as ourselves and
Mhm.
give that attention. I love that. Um,
Mhm.
so thinking about courage. So when I think of
Mm.
you, Jennifer, I think about courage and the courage
Mm.
to leave an unhappy marriage, to
Mm.
rediscover yourself and to really build your own business. So can you take us back
Mm.
to a pivotal moment when you decided to take that leap? Like what is that moment more or less and what really motivated you to make such a transformational change in your life?
Mm. Mhm. Yes. Well, it all started in 2020 during COVID, which I know many of
Mm.
us had so many transformational experiences, both good and bad, during that time. It started with me changing careers. I was a public school teacher for almost 20 years. And during COVID, I had an opportunity to focus solely on fundraising for a nonprofit that I'd been a longtime member of. And they hired me for a year to focus on their online fundraising. So figuring out how to do galas, how to do online silent auction, as well as their creating sustaining membership program, as well as a lot of other fundraising opportunities, including grant writing. And so I was able to take a year off of teaching and really focus in on that. And thankfully, it was all virtual work. And so I discovered that I loved fundraising for nonprofits and decided to start my own grant consulting business in May of 2021 and discovered that there's a lot of small nonprofits around the country that need grant support but can't hire a full-time grant writer. So I
Mm.
really fill that void for them. And so being able to create my own business where I can work anywhere in the world is incredibly exciting for me because I travel is one of my passions, and so being able to do good work and have positive impact for nonprofits around the country um, really has filled my cup a lot, and just being able to do that, both things, travel and doing impactful work. The second part to that question regarding my marriage is for a number of years, I was really struggling in the marriage in terms of us really kind of growing apart. And while I really love him as a person, I was just really felt out of love with him. And so for like really 10 years, I went to different counselors trying to like figure things out. And at that time, at the beginning of that, my struggle was my son was 12. So I felt like, I don't want to do that to him. And, my husband is a good person. Like, why can't I just make this work? So I really struggled for a long time. And then during COVID, once I launched my business and got excited about that, but was still just really struggling to have a fulfilling and exciting marriage. I finally came to that decision after so many years of agonizing over it. I decided to have this discussion with my then husband, and we separated in January of 2023 and have since divorced. And while it was excruciating, to come to that point, because I was born and raised Catholic, and like you make that life
Mm,
commitment to stay married, and I was worried about what my parents were going to say, what his mom was going to say, because I dearly loved his mom and
mm,
she has since passed. And what was our son going to say? Like all of these outside forces that I felt like were just really going to come down on me. And um, that was hard to really come to terms with that. I finally got to that point in my life where I just I had this epiphany of like, wait a minute, this is my one life. And if I am so unhappy, clearly I'm not making my husband happy. And I've just got to do what's best for me. And whatever anyone else thinks, that's their that's their decision, that's their choice. And I can't control that. So once I made that decision, um, of having a discussion with him and just saying, okay, we're done. It it was liberating and so heartbreaking at the same time, knowing I was just, really hurting him. I will say for listeners out there, it was a happy ending because one, my ex-husband and I are still in good terms. We still talk regularly and we have a good relationship between us, and most importantly for our son, that he knows that he is still loved and cared for as a 22-year-old and will always be a family in some capacity. And the
yeah.
other thing, and I want to let listeners know, is that all my fears around other people's judgment never came to
Mm,
fruition. My parents were so supportive. His mom was incredibly supportive. Our son was understanding. Um, and it was such an aha moment for me that, wait a minute, when I speak my truth and really take a stand to be courageous, that everything else kind of falls into place. And even if it didn't, even if my parents would have been really upset with me or his mom would have been devastated, I know I would have been able to get through it because I was finally being authentic to
mm.
myself and I was no longer abandoning myself.
Wow. I thank you for going into that, right? The layers of right. The question, right, was what pivotal moment? And like, right, it isn't necessarily a pivotal moment in our life. It is
Right.
a
Yeah.
10-year building up
Mm-hmm.
of the courage to take
Mm-hmm.
the next step that
Yeah.
brings it all together, that connects all of those dots, that gives us
Mm-hmm.
the path that we get to be on a transformational change in our life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I was chuckling when the words came right out of your mouth. So I have like affirmation card decks, and one of my card decks this morning that my started my day today is speak
Oh.
your truth.
I love
Wow.
that.
The universe is so great. I
Mm,
love this. So I'm just
yes,
going to
me
quickly
too.
read it for the
Oh,
listeners
please do.
because oh
Yes, I
my
want to
gosh,
hear
and
this.
for us, yes.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
okay, speak your truth. So when you have something to say and it matters, speak it. Holding
Mm,
back, pleasing people, and shutting up are things of
mhm,
the past. Now
mm,
is the right time to say what you think and how you feel.
mm. Love that. That is so perfect because that really ties into something I didn't say. I should have started preface the whole conversation by saying I am a recovering people pleaser. Like
Mm.
that is who I have been since a little girl because being the oldest of six kids, that's how I got my attention is being
Wow.
helpful, being considerate, being flexible, keeping
Mm.
my mouth shut so that everything went smoothly, that everyone's feelings were, managed, all of that. And so for me to come to this point of deciding that after 24 years of marriage, I'm going to walk away. Ooh, that was that was hard. And it's something that I'm continuing to address in terms of being a people pleaser because that's my default. When I'm worried, when I'm scared,
Mm.
that's my default. But the what I'm encouraged by is that I recognize it and then I can, pivot and say, okay, oh, there's my pattern again. Okay, I
Mm.
can do something different. I can choose to do something different. So that's what I'm working on right now. Instead of being a people pleaser and feeling like I've got to manage it all and control everyone and everything, it's just to let them do whatever they need to do and let them
Mm.
be whoever they need to be. And it's not on me to fix it or to fix them.
Yeah. Yeah. Less of a fixing, more of a letting it be. I love that.
Mhm.
That sounds like great. I was going to say, like, what is your advice for the listeners? This is all great advice, right? For anyone that's feeling
Oh,
stuck or afraid to
mhm,
pursue your dream, or right, that
mhm,
feeling of fulfillment is really what I'm hearing, like from your story.
mhm.
It's less of like,
Yes.
oh, I dream of this, but
Mm,
really it's that feeling of fulfillment that I feel like
mhm,
was really that rediscovery for you was like, I know this isn't it,
mhm.
And I
Exactly.
think that's a big thing
Mhm,
to recognize, in that acceptance, right? When that acceptance comes to say like
mhm,
this isn't it, when we are aware of what it
mhm.
isn't, then we can more
Yeah.
clearly point to what is.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yes, I wholeheartedly agree. And I wanna put a plug in right now in the importance of being able to reach out to
Mm,
others, when we're in a discerning mode of like what our next steps are for any big decision. When I
yeah.
was really contemplating of leaving my husband, I found a coach and actually two coaches, and they were so helpful in helping me navigate all of my feelings and my thoughts and everything. And in one of the coaching sessions, I'd had an epiphany is that I had abandoned myself. And when I had that epiphany, I
Mm,
burst into tears and I cried for 20 minutes to think that for all these years, on some level, I had abandoned myself. And really back to your question of like what was a pivotal moment in the terms of like leaving my husband, that was the pivotal moment when I realized like, oh, I abandoned myself for all those years and tried to be someone I wasn't and didn't want to be. Um, and that I just can't abandon myself anymore. That's not who I want to be anymore. So, yeah. So it
mm,
is so important to find support because we never have to go through anything alone, whether it be faith in, God or divine or, the universe, however you want to define higher
yeah.
power, to our friends, to our family, coaching, coaches, counselors, whoever. There's so much support out there. It's just a matter of asking. asking for that support. It's
Yeah,
so critical.
absolutely. I and absolutely, and I heard you say a couple other things too that are really great takeaways from the beginning, right? Is about those practices, the self-care, those things that were
Mhm.
really supporting you. And so thinking about like
Mhm.
the empowerment that is created through the challenges that we
Mhm.
grow through.
Mhm.
Obviously your journey hasn't been without those challenges. So can
Mhm.
you share how your faith, meditation, yoga, like all of these practices,
Mhm.
right? How do they help you
Mhm.
navigate through the setbacks in your life or your career, whichever path you
Mm.
want to discuss, but how do those
Mm.
really help you
Mhm.
navigate those setbacks?
Mm. Mhm. Yeah, that's such a important question. Having daily rituals of prayer, meditation, doing yoga, trying to walk every day, journaling, all of that really helps me to stay centered and helps me to see the bigger picture of what is happening right now, but more importantly, what the possibilities are. So even if I have a setback, so for example, in my business, if I have this connection with a potential client and the meeting's gone really well and we've had some good exchanges back and forth and it's looking like this person's going to sign me on and then all of a sudden their funding falls through and then it's just not going to happen right now and just think, oh no, I worked so hard. I really was hoping and wishing this is going to come to fruition, but then my daily practices remind me of like, it wasn't meant to be. I don't need to worry about it. There's other I can attract other clients. There's other opportunities for me. I don't need to get stuck in disappointment. I can feel it for a little bit, but like don't get stuck in it. I tell myself, that I can move on and just know I can attract as many clients as I need and want. Um, and doing those daily rituals really help me um, deal with disappointment as in both my personal and professional life, as well as just like the daily grind of things. Sometimes days get um, long and hard and a little grueling and maybe a little boring at times, but my daily practices really help me stay grounded and know, hey, this is just a blip on the radar. There's bigger and better things coming for me. So
Yeah,
yeah.
what I love about that too is how it can be, right? I think about like mundane. Sometimes I hear people
Yeah.
talking about like, oh, it's so mundane to have these rituals and things. And
Mm,
really, those are the things that I can tell from my experience that when I go
mhm,
back to those mundane things, they really
mhm.
help me get centered. They really help me get
Yes.
grounded back
Mhm,
into what I know to be true. While all these
mhm.
things on the outside of me, I'm unable to control all the things, but what we
Right.
can control is what we put our time, our own energy into. And
Mhm,
I mean, even the example of saying you're putting your work into, hopefully receiving this client and then it falls through for whatever
yeah.
reason. It's like, oh, I worked
Mhm,
so hard. And then it's like, oh, wait, come back to that center. Remember that you're
mhm.
always taken care of. It's
Yes.
someone else is on the way or they have the support that they need and really coming
Mhm,
back to that to just I think that that's super that's great to really go back to those foundational pieces that even if
mhm,
they feel mundane, they're there to support you and hopefully it is more of an autopilot, right? That we go to them
mhm.
first versus
Yes.
emergency like urgent
Mhm,
situations, right?
mhm. Exactly.
Oh, yeah, that's
Yeah.
good. I
Yeah.
think
It
like
is.
what maybe small actionable step can our listeners take to, incorporate these practices into their own lives if they don't have a set ritual? What would you say about like
Mm.
maybe a small actionable step?
Mhm. Yes. I think it's really important for all of us to find at least one thing to do each day that can slow our mind down, that can get us reconnected to our bodies and to higher power for those of us who believe in a higher power. Um, because in that one ritual, it can really get us centered again and grounded. So, for example, it could be just taking a 10-minute walk, no matter the weather, just getting outside in nature and taking a quick 10-minute walk can be so beneficial. Um, Having a gratitude journal, just writing down 3 things a day that you are grateful for. That doesn't take much time, and I'm a full believer in the power of gratitude, and just writing down each day. Um, Being able to, yeah, so just figuring out at least one thing that can be helpful in um, getting back to yourself is, I think, is so important.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the fresh air, the breath of fresh air, like
Yes.
walking outside.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
found myself even doing that this morning. Just
Mm-hmm.
opening the door and just breathing in the fresh air to really, you know,
Mm-hmm.
release some energy and welcome in some
Yeah.
fresh energy. I love that. A
Mm-hmm.
simple walk can be so therapeutic.
It can. It really can. Yeah,
Yeah,
and I mean, and there's a lot of research out there now too that supports that, how beneficial it is for us to take a walk every day, even for 10 minutes. There's
right,
benefits to that. So that's encouraging,
right.
something as simple as that can really have a positive impact on our mental well-being and as well as our physical
Yeah.
well-being.
I love that. So I want to talk about your grant writing consulting a little bit
Mm,
more and how you
sure.
create impact through that. And
Mm,
like helping nonprofits secure funds, right? They need
mhm,
to transform they need that to transform their communities. And so what
mhm.
really inspired you to focus your work in that field specifically? I would love to hear more about that.
Sure. Yeah. So going back a minute to the first part of my conversation with you, having that opportunity to work with that one nonprofit that needed fundraising support, and then discovering I loved grant writing, and then going down the path a little bit further, discovering that a lot of small nonprofits around the country need that support, but just
Mm,
don't have the funding for a full time grant writer. And so, being a grant consultant, I can provide whatever services they need in order to secure the funding for them to continue doing their amazing work in their communities. And so, for me, I can do research so that I can give a whole list of grant opportunities for a nonprofit leader, both governmental, corporate, and private foundations, because there's literally billions and billions of dollars out there every single year that can be tapped into if a nonprofit leader knows where to look and to ensure that their mission aligns with the funder's mission. And so that's the other part of my job, is to find mission aligned funders for nonprofit leaders. The other services I provide is grant writing support. So I'm happy to write a full grant proposal from beginning to end, or to review a current proposal that a leader has but needs it to be polished and to take it to the next level of being a really robust and expansive proposal. So happy to do that as well. And the other areas of service I provide are doing a grant calendar and grant management. So doing grant reporting, because many grant awards require reports either
mm.
quarterly or at the end of the grant cycle. So I help a leader bring together all the data and the narrative that's needed to write those reports and get those submitted on time. So yeah, so I provide all grant support and
Wow.
for whatever leaders need. So they can hire me for one little at some aspect of it, or they can hire me for a monthly retainer, and then I am their grant writer and provide all the services they need, but at a fraction of the cost, because they don't have to pay for my benefits, or all of those things that
Mm.
really add up when they have to hire a full-time grant writer as an employee.
Oh, wow. That's so inspiring. Okay, so and Jennifer, where are you located at?
I'm in Cedar Rapids, Iowa.
Iowa, yes.
Hmm.
Okay, and in your line of work, do you have to be in a specific state to be able to write for them?
No,
No.
no, I don't.
Okay.
I can work with any nonprofit in the country.
Oh, exciting.
And
Okay.
then if it's a new state I haven't been familiar with, then I go and do the research to make sure I'm following all their governmental guidelines for their state. So, for example, my current clients right now are in Minnesota and Wisconsin and in Iowa. I had um, a client in Honolulu, Hawaii for a year until they grew their organization large enough that they could hire their own full-time grant writer. So that was very exciting. Yeah, so I can thankfully I can work with any nonprofits in the country. So that I love that I can provide that kind of support for
So
any
versatile.
nonprofit
You're like a
leader.
Swiss Army knife.
I love that.
She can do it all,
That's
folks. She can
so
do it
funny.
all and from anywhere. I love that. Okay,
Mhm.
so right, I'm thinking with over 4 million in funding secured for nonprofit profits and small businesses, you clearly excel in what you do. And I'm curious, like, is there a success story from your work that really stands out to you that has kept you
Mm.
motivated? Right, that first one is always there because it was the first, but like, is
Oh,
there a
mhm.
specific success story that you've had that keeps you going?
Oh, sure, yeah. Yeah, thankfully, I've had a lot of really, great success, and I'm just so, humbled and honored to provide this kind of support for nonprofit leaders. One of the grants that I was able to secure for one of the nonprofits in Minneapolis that I've been working for 3 years was a foundation based in California, and they awarded them $120,000 a year for 6 years. So
Wow.
over, yeah, so over $700,000 over a course of 6 years. And that's really helped sustain them and get them to the next
Mm.
level of providing the support needed for their community and those that they're advocating for. And so that's was really exciting to get that kind of grant.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that because I mean, I wasn't thinking about that sustainable opportunity with
Hmm.
the grant writing, right? Like it's not just they get a one-time check. Some of it's like ongoing that you've
Hmm.
helped them secure. Like that is so impactful. Wow.
Hmm.
Uh,
It is, and that's why my job is so exciting because to be able to tap into
beautiful.
that kind of money can really elevate a
Yeah.
nonprofit's ability to have such greater impact, in their part of the
Mm.
world. So yeah, that it's really rewarding, very, very
So
exciting to be
so
a part
for
of it.
Yeah, for someone that's new to grants or nonprofit work, what would you say the biggest misconception is for the grant process then?
Mm. I think for folks that don't have much experience or no experience with grants and grant writing, is that it it's a longer process. It takes it takes a chunk of time to craft your first grant proposal to make sure that it's compelling and it has a really good storyline and that the programs that you're highlighting have good inputs and outcomes and be able to measure all of that. Um, so that there's that, and then the other piece is that it can take up to 3 to 6 months to hear back from foundations, particularly private foundations, because their boards tend to only meet quarterly. And
Oh,
so
wow.
if you apply and then it's like in the middle of their grant cycle, it could take up to 6 months to hear back. So it's not always a quick turnaround time. So it's something that you need to plan for long term and have a really robust grant calendar for the whole year, so that what the grant cycles are for each of the grants you want to apply for, and just know that it could take some time to hear back. Um, and the
Yeah.
other important thing too is that just because you write a grant and get it submitted on time doesn't automatically mean you're going to get the funding, because oftentimes it's highly competitive. And
Mm,
so, it's not guaranteed you're going to get the money. So I always tell my clients, clearly the more proposals we submit, the greater chances we have in getting funding. There was a recent study done by Instrumental, which is one of the big grant research platforms today in the U.S., and they did some research, and it showed that if a nonprofit writes 4 to 5 grants, I mean, if they write 10 grants, then and get them submitted, then the average is that they get 4 to 5 awards out of those 10. So half, 40 to 50%, essentially. Um, so, which isn't
wow.
horrible, but that means you're having to take a good chunk of time to get all of those proposals submitted, if you
Yeah.
want it to be fruitful, and to get that money, that funnel of money, um, coming to you.
Wow. Yeah, timeline for sure. That makes
Mm-hmm.
sense to understand
Mm-hmm.
more about the timeline because
Mm-hmm.
I've heard people in networking and stuff that are either starting a nonprofit or they dream of like having a nonprofit, like those kinds
Mm-hmm.
of things.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's a big nugget right there to really just go in with a clear head about understanding that it's not just, you write a quick letter and it's
Mm-hmm.
submitted and there's an answer for it right away. And just that
Mm-hmm.
timeline, I think, is such a huge thing for, I mean, leadership in general to really get a full
Mm-hmm.
view and
Yeah.
understanding so that it's not, you can release any of the doubt or any of those
Mm-hmm.
feelings that come up with like the concerns or your own personal timelines that they might have, right? Like for
Mm-hmm.
a project that or a program that they're really looking to launch, like all of those
Mm-hmm.
things sound very strategic. Your whole what you're doing sounds very much like research, strategy, and really
Mm-hmm.
like storytelling. Am I getting that right? Like I
Yes,
feel like you're,
absolutely.
yeah. Wow.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Hmm. I've never even thought about grant writing in that way, like getting this deeper look at it, like such a
Mm-hmm.
beautiful way to support growth and impact in a community, to be able to
Mm-hmm.
really hear. So, okay, so I want to ask more about like what does that process look like for a specific project? How in
Mm-hmm.
depth are you going with them while you write up the grant? Like how many
Mm-hmm.
hours maybe, or is it just like, I don't know. I'm curious about like your process of helping them get a grant. Maybe does it depend on the size of it or yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it depends on the size of the grant and what kind of grant it is. If it's a governmental grant, whether it be a city, county, state, or federal, they tend to be more involved in
Mm,
terms of like more questions, wanting more in-depth answers to the questions. So for example, for a federal grant, it could be anywhere between 50 to 75 pages. Um, of a proposal. And so for federal grants, they take at least 6 weeks, ideally 2 months, to like really create a robust and compelling proposal for the federal grants. And for those, you're looking at a lot of money potentially, multiple six figures, upwards into millions of dollars. But those are really for larger nonprofits that are well established. Smaller nonprofits could partner with those well established nonprofits to get that money. So that's certainly something to consider for smaller nonprofits that want to tap into federal funding, is to do partnerships. And there's a lot of tremendous benefits, in terms of potential partnering, for smaller nonprofit leaders. Um, the other, in terms of how the process is, I'm very collaborative with my nonprofit leaders. I include them on all of the first drafts to get their feedback to make sure that I'm getting the right tone, that I'm telling the right stories. Because, back to your point about storytelling, that is so critical, especially today. It's Funders are really wanting those individual stories of how a nonprofit is impacting the folks that they're working with, or if it's environmental, the environmental impact, or if they're working with animal rights, whatever their mission is, to have those individual stories to show impact really pulls at the heartstrings of funders, and it can get you to the next level of support and getting funded. So there's that, making sure that the storytelling that's happening in the narrative is compelling, and that leaders and their staff are giving feedback. So it's a very long process in some respects, because there's a
Yeah.
number of drafts and getting enough eyes on the content to make sure everything is accurate and compelling, um, and that it's the best proposal possible. So for a smaller grant, for like a smaller family foundation grant of 10 to 50K, it usually takes about 10 to 15 hours. And then larger grants, like some corporate grants, are more involved. Some are very short. So it just really depends on the corporation. Same with family foundations. It really depends. Some have just a couple of pages to fill out, and then you submit it and it's very straightforward. Others, it's pages, 10 to 15 pages worth of questions to answer. Um, so it all really just depends on what the application is asking you to do. But yeah, it's my process is very collaborative. I want to make sure everyone's getting their input and their feedback, and making sure I do all the edits, and so that it is a perfect document, both grammatically and as well as telling the story of their tremendous impact the nonprofit is providing in their community.
Yeah. I love that. I just want to tell you, you are a storyteller. Like that is just so tried and true. I love hearing the in-depth understanding of all of what you do. Like it sounds like you put your heart into it, and you're really hearing those
Mm-mm.
heart stories from the
Hmm.
organizations, and then you get to translate that. You're their translator
Yeah.
to put it on paper, right? I don't know. What is your title that
Mm-hmm.
you call yourself though?
I call myself a grant consultant.
Okay, okay.
Mhm.
I can give you magical names just on my own from what I
Oh, please do. I would love to hear what comes to mind.
Yeah, I love it. Well, okay, so
Oh, funny.
so talking a little bit more about just the storytelling aspect, how
Mhm.
has sharing your story and your expertise amplified the impact that you get to make personally or professionally, right? Regarding either side of the
Mm,
stories we've been talking about, I would love to hear that. Like, how do you
mm.
feel that sharing your story and your expertise is helping you pursue more of that for your personal and professional life?
Oh, wow. I love that. Gosh, I haven't thought of that before, but that's a very compelling question. I'm discovering that the more vulnerable I am with my clients, with my friends and family, the more real my relationships become, and it gives them permission to be vulnerable and to speak their truth. And that took me a long time to come to that realization, because I always had it in my head that I always had to keep it together, and that I shouldn't share what I'm thinking or what I'm feeling, because I don't want to, like, you know im- impinge on anyone, or
Mm,
share my mess with others. But the reality is that that's that's where true relationships um, are born, is being vulnerable and being truly authentic, showing all my imperfections, as well as the gifts that I have to share. So it's taken me a long time. And Brene Brown's book, The Gift of Imperfection, I've read
mm,
that several times in the last year and a half, and
mm.
that's just her words have just been really instrumental for me to remind myself the power of vulnerability, and that when I'm vulnerable, it allows other people to be vulnerable, and that we get to a whole other level of deeper understanding and connection. Highly recommend that book.
I was just taking a note.
Okay.
Write my
Cool.
note. You said the gift of imperfection.
Hmm.
I got it,
Yeah,
Jennifer. I got it.
it's
That's one
awesome.
I don't think I've read that one. I was like, oh, I'm writing that one
Mm,
down.
hmm. Yeah, so good.
Oh, that is so good. And the transparency again is just
Yeah.
so welcoming for people because it breaks down
Hmm.
that barrier of
Hmm.
them needing to be perfect or always
Yeah.
put together and feeling like,
Hmm.
oh, well, that does give them the quote unquote permission, right? To
Hmm. Hmm.
be more of who they are and just sharing it all, and not just
Hmm.
like blah sharing it all, but just
Yeah.
the real moment, being present in whatever is happening in
Hmm.
their life and being able to share
Hmm.
that in a really authentic way, like you said.
Yeah.
So good. It really helps
Hmm.
people relate.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It does. Yeah,
And
I
and
totally
your
agree.
story is sure gonna like resonate with our listeners. So like what would you
Mm.
say as we're wrapping up? Like what would you say to
Okay.
someone who's unsure of how to find or pursue their own passions, right? Because you're very passionate about the
Mm.
work that you do, can feel it, hear
Mm.
it, see it in how you
Mm.
share. What would you
Mm.
say, is something that could support the listeners to find or pursue their own passions more?
Mm. Yes. I would really encourage journaling. And for
Mm,
some folks, that might not be their thing, but if someone is out there and they're just really struggling with wanting to figure out what their passion is and what kind of dream life they want to create, writing it out can be really powerful. I've found a lot of aha moments when I've taken even just 5 minutes to journal, whatever is in my mind, getting it out, and then and writing it by hand versus typing it is even
yes.
more impactful. That brain to hand connection. It's really surprising what comes out on paper. So that I would encourage trying that out for like a week and just see what comes up.
Yeah, science is so fun. There's definitely
Hmm.
scientific. I need to look up the actual words because this has brought up
Right.
so much about the
Mm,
head to the
mhm.
hand to like through your
Yeah.
heart, what
Yes.
happens there. And I
Mhm.
believe for me, what happens is that I'm slowing down long enough to actually write it out, which is
Mhm.
helping me catch up and slow down
Mhm.
just that little bit extra.
Mhm.
So I'm with you on that bandwagon, write it out, give yourself a
Mm.
little extra space. And it's also something about the pressure that we put
Oh.
on our pen. There's something with that that happens
Hmm.
scientifically. Yeah.
Ooh, I didn't know about that. I'll have to look
Hmm.
that piece up. That's so interesting. Very cool.
Yeah.
And one of my coaches told me recently, when we write, we invite. So
Mm,
any idea that comes to mind, we're
that's good.
inviting God or divine, the universe to like bring it to us. I love that. When we write, we invite.
Yeah.
I love
Mm.
that.
I love one-liners. That's a great one-liner.
Right? I know. I agree. I love that. I love that one
Oh,
liner too. I've been thinking about
yeah.
it.
I love it. And
Mhm.
just because I love to bring this out, I had a mentor tell me that her mentor had shared this. So I'm going to continue to share it because that's what women
Oh,
really love to
yes,
do.
please
This is
do.
where the wisdom of women really comes in clutch too,
Mhm.
because we
Mhm.
want to come back to our communities and give what we learn
Yeah.
outward. And so anyway,
Mhm.
what I wanted to share is you've mentioned, whatever we believe in, the higher power, God, universe, whatever it is. And she
Mhm.
had told me, I love acronyms. And she had told me that her mentor shared that she just says Gus, God, universe, source. And this sat well
Oh,
with me because I have a
oh, I love
sister
that.
named Augusta and we call her Gus. So I was like, I can totally get
Oh.
on board with, just full
Mhm.
blanket of God, universe, source, whatever you believe. It's
I
Gus.
love that. Oh, thank you for sharing that, Becky. I'm going to remember that. I'm going to use that.
Yeah, that's so
Yeah.
good. So,
Mhm. It is so
okay,
good.
yeah, thank you, Jennifer. This has been so inspiring to have this conversation about your story, where you're going, like how you're bringing more impact with grant writing and consulting. What would you like a key message to be to the listeners as they take away from your story? What comes up for you that you would like to leave with them?
Mm. Remember that this is your one life and dream big and
Mm,
pursue those dreams because it is so possible. Just have to take that first step.
yeah, I love that.
Mm.
I would love to say that anyone who's listening that is part of a mission-driven organization or a nonprofit looking to secure funding,
Mhm.
talk to Jennifer, connect with Jennifer,
Mm.
um, and give her a call. So, Jennifer, where would be a great place for our listeners to connect with you and learn more about your services?
Oh, yes. So I have my website. It's grant-knowledge.com. So www grant-knowledge.com. So you can find me there. And then all of my contact information is right there. Yeah.
Great. I'll have that listed too.
Awesome.
But that sounds really great.
Wonderful.
I want to thank you, Jennifer, for, sharing about your personal story a little bit more, giving us some insight and some real depth on for myself to really understand more about the grant writing process and the
Mm-hmm.
beautiful work that you're doing. And sharing that wisdom. This is really practical
Mm.
in helping us overcome the challenges that we have, those tools that you shared and giving your time for the show today. Thank you so much for bringing your inspiration and your wisdom to the table.
Oh, well, Becky, thank you so much for inviting me. This has just been such a thrill. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. So if you're inspired by Jennifer's story and want to connect with more women creating extraordinary impact like Jennifer is, then make sure that you subscribe to the Choose on Purpose podcast. Remember to check out the rest of our episodes around the Wisdom of Women series. Yes, that's the WOW series. And where we feature incredible women just like Jennifer who are making a difference in their world. And thank you for tuning in. Remember that your story matters, your impact is real, and your dreams are worth pursuing. So until next time, stay empowered and keep choosing on purpose. I'm your host, Becky Plutz. Until next time.